the book. Send me the link. Yeah, I got the book. I've got the link. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, today we're going to be reading through a short booklet of Shaykh Abdul-Rahman ibn Nasir al-Sa'di, which is on the topic of happiness. The title of the book in Arabic is called Al-Wasa'il al-Mufida ila Hayat al-Sa'ida, or Lil Hayat al-Sa'ida, which is the beneficial means to a happy life. This book has been translated into English, and inshallah I think a copy is being shared on Telegram groups. If you're MCL, if you're on the Telegram group of MCL, you'll find the copy there. It's called 8 Steps to Happiness. That's the name of the book in English. It's been translated by Dawrah publishers, and inshallah it's a small booklet. It's beneficial. Another book on this topic, which is, I guess, important and significant as it pertains to the same topick, is a book by Dale Carnegie called, the name of the book is called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Okay, a book by Dale Carnegie, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It's a good book, right? Generally speaking, he's got a few books. How to Win Friends and Influence People. He's got another book on public speaking for business, The Art of Persuasive Speaking. He's got another book which is on similar topics, right? But this book specifically, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, is from the same genre of books which talks about, generally speaking, how to improve and be more content with what you have in this worldly life, right? So that's a book I recommend you to read alongside this book by the Shaykh as well. So if you haven't read the book or listened to the summary or done the audio book, then I strongly recommend that you do so. I'm going to read through the book in English, and where needed, stop and comment on it. So please get a PDF copy of the book up on your phone so you can follow, because that way you get the benefit of listening and looking at the same time, which means you're going to take in more information that way, right? If you have a copy of the Arabic, you can copy it, you can follow on that. But I'm going to stick to the English because I'm assuming most people here, apart from one or two, understand English as opposed to Arabic in terms of proficiency. But just to summarize, as is always the case, I always recommend for students, before they delve into a book, look at the index. What are the 10 or 11 or 8 steps, right, that the author mentions? So you start off with the general before you go into the specific. Okay, you start off with the general before you go into the specific. So if you look at the index, which is where we're going to start at the end of the book or the beginning of the book, where the index is. We'll look at what he mentions in terms of the ways in which a person attains happiness, the means towards happiness, so that's what you're going to focus on in terms of memorizing, in terms of grasping and understanding. So the first thing that he mentions, here he mentions 8 steps, but there's subsections, right? There's subsections. In the book, I think he mentions about 20 separate sections. In the translation, they've put them under or as subsections, right? So each one can be a section in of itself. So it begins by saying true belief and performing good deeds. Number one, that's the first step, or the first means. Second, he says occupying oneself with activity or useful knowledge. Okay. What I want you to do is to paraphrase these now yourself in your own words. The reason why, because sometimes the translation becomes literal, right? And you need to be able to understand what he's saying here. So when he says occupying oneself with activity or useful knowledge, what do you understand from that? You write that in your own words, right? Number 3, occupying oneself with the present. Here in the translation, they put that as a subsection, okay, underneath this heading. But you can extract it and make it a point in itself. Occupying oneself with the present. Then he mentions remembrance. That's another point. Dhikr. After that, shukr. That's another point. Gratitude. Right? Gratitude. After that, implementing the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Implementing the teachings. This refers specifically to a hadith. Specifically, this hadith is a hadith which says, look at the person that's lesser than you, not the person that's higher than you, because that's more beneficial for you in terms of what? Being grateful for the blessings that Allah has bestowed upon you. So this, implementing the teachings of the Prophet here, that they've put as a subheading, specifically refers to a methodology in how a person perceives things in his life, right? You don't look at the one that has the big house and the nice car, because you're going to what? Be ungrateful for what you have of small things, right? And there's another motivational lecture which I recommend you to read called Acres of Diamonds. This is another Acres of Diamonds. Write it down, look it up, because it speaks on this topic, right? Specifically. Meaning a man's content. He's got a house, he's got a farm, he's got food, he's happy. But someone comes along and tells him about something called a diamond, right? This shiny thing that's worth loads of money. Before that time, the concept didn't exist. He didn't care, right, about diamonds. He had what he needed in life. Someone comes about diamonds, and now he woke up happy, but he's gone to sleep unhappy. Why? Because now there's something that he hasn't got that he thinks he needs, right? So he goes in search of this thing. On his mantelpiece or wherever, he's got this black rock, by the way, which he found in his garden, took out. Comes back after 20 years of searching for happiness, i.e. diamonds. Comes back, doesn't find it, realizes he's sitting on acres of diamonds. Contentment was where he was, he didn't have to go far, basically. So anyway, this is occupying, so looking at those that are lesser than you, not those that are better than you. The next one, he says, removing whatever produces sadness and seeking means of happiness. Removing whatever produces sadness and seeking means of happiness, right? Then after that, dua. So removing things that are causes of unhappiness, then dua. Then he says, imagining worst scenarios, right? How bad can it really be, right? When something bad happens, it could be worse. But it's not. So you do what? You lessen the concern of the situation. Instead of making it a mountain, you turn it into a molehill yourself, right? How bad? It could be a lot worse. Alhamdulillah, it's not that bad. Someone crashes a car, it's going to cost him money. Okay, I could have lost my life, isn't it? Alhamdulillah, it was only a car. Also, he says, firmness of the heart and reliance on Allah. Firmness of the heart, that's one. Tawakkul ala Allah, reliance upon Allah, that's two. Right? Again, they're subsections. Repelling evil with good. Again, paraphrase it in your own words. Repelling evil with good. Even if you're just changing the word repelling to another word. Because it's going to help you to memorize it more if it's your own words and you're not just copying what the author says. Also, he says, high aspirations. And here it says, and inner energy. Okay, that sounds a bit wrong, doesn't it? Tai Chi type stuff, right? I'm going to be able to just do that and he goes flying. I just touched him, right? We don't believe in that type of energy. So what does he mean here? What does the translation mean? Inner energy, right? Are we speaking about positive thinking, right? I.e., Also, he says, enjoying moments of happiness. right? And then that's subdivided into expecting Allah's response, taking lessons from calamities, and prioritize important tasks. Prioritize important tasks. What I'm asking you to do as students is what I do as a teacher. Okay? The reason why, because as a methodology of being a student, you need to put yourself in the position of being a teacher so you can comprehend the text. All right? How do you explain this back to somebody else? That's the question you ask yourself. All right? So the first one he speaks about is to do with Iman and actions, i.e. knowing your sense of purpose. Knowing your sense of purpose. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create you? Right? Allah created us to worship Him. That's Iman. Right? And that's according to, by doing actions as well. So it's through your strength of Iman and your actions how a Muslim deals with things that happen in his life which are outside of his control. I.e., if it's good, then alhamdulillah, we have gratitude and thankfulness. And if it's something that is bad, like grief, losing a loved one, right? Then a Muslim, or disappointment, or then a Muslim faces it with patience, which diminishes its impact, right? And allows him to deal with it. So this is the first one, is speaking about Iman and actions. The first one he speaks about is Iman and actions. Let's read the introduction first. He goes, praise be to Allah, and for Him are all praises. There's no deity worthy of worship but Him alone without any partners. Peace and blessings be upon His final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, companions, and all those who follow his guidance from the believers until the last day. There is no doubt or illusion that happiness is sought by every person from every walk of life. Muslim and non-Muslim, right? There are certain things which are shared. Okay, they're shared things, right? I.e., every Muslim and every non-Muslim is going to experience grief, is going to experience ups, is going to experience downs, right? That's shared. But the response to them is different from a believer to a disbeliever, from a person of Iman, person of lack of Iman. Yet how it is sought remains the key for many of us to understand in pursuit of it. Some find joy in accumulating wealth, hoping this will fill the void of being content. For others, it is indulging in faulty entertainment, vices and promiscuity, and anything that might distract attention away from reality, even if it's considered unlawful or immoral. Others drown in bottles of alcohol or in the sounds of decadent music industry, each witnessing and seeking something that will lure them out the states of grief and anxiety, i.e. how not to worry and what to do when you have situations that do worry you, basically, right? You have the response of the believer, you have the response of the disbeliever. He goes, how then is delight and contentment achieved? That's the question. How to attain happiness. Indeed, Allah the Most High is the creator of this world and has not left mankind without the means to achieve the guidance and pathway to what the innate desire of man wants and needs. For example, Allah the Most High said in the Quran, and He mentions هَذَا بَيَانٌ لِلنَّاسِ وَهُدًى وَمَوْعِظَةٌ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This, the Quran, is a clear statement, it's a bayan, right? For all of people, and it's a guidance, وَهُدًى, right? And it's a maw'idha, and it's a admonition for those who are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those that have taqwa, those that benefit from it. So to proceed, states of happiness, tranquility, and having a peace of mind and happiness, and doing away with anxiety and depression are goals we actively seek. Okay, attaining them will translate to our happiness and lead to a goodly life. Reaching them, however, is contingent on three main causes, namely, causes that return back to your deen, your religion, causes that pertain back to your tabi'ah, which is your nature, how you are as a person, the tabi'at al-insan generally, and tabi'at al-ashkhas anta. Everyone has their own tabi'ah, their own way. And also causes that go back to practical means like actions that you do. Okay. Then he says, none of which are possible to secure except by one who has believed and submitted themselves to the will of the Creator. Aside from believers, others may assume reasons in attaining the causes of happiness from one aspect, yet another cause will escape them from the other side that is stronger, more qualified, and useful. Okay, meaning that some people, they're going to follow the means to happiness which are based upon actions, i.e. particular actions. But because they lack Iman, they're going to miss bigger means towards happiness. Right? They're going to miss bigger means towards happiness. Some people think happiness is in attaining things, getting more material possessions, when the opposite is true. The more happier people are the more people that give more charity. Not the ones that are stingy, right? Stingy people are miserable. Everyone knows the story of Scrooge, or every winter you see the Scrooge, right? That mean person or whatever. And he realizes that meanness and stinginess doesn't bring about happiness, it's the opposite. Anyway, he goes and says, I will mention in this treatise of mine the ways and means to achieve this lofty goal that is universally quested. Meaning everyone wants, i.e. everything that you do is in search of or in pursuit of being content and being happy. Isn't it? And everything that you're avoiding is avoiding misery, depression, anxiety, worry. Right? If a person is constantly worried about the future, thinking about the past, he's not going to be content in the present. Right? But if a person lives in the present, as you're going to see later in this treatise, in this risala, if a person lives in the present and doesn't think too much about the past and isn't worried about the future all the time, he's going to find contentment. He's going to have enough to occupy himself within the present for him not to have to worry about the future or think too much and delve and ponder over the past. So he goes, amongst the causes of happiness are those that have been weighed wisely and well trodden. It's something which is known by tajriba. It can be proven, right, through experience basically, right? So it's something which are known, which have been weighed and well trodden. Amongst the causes for misery are those that have also been notable and recognized, which is why at the beginning of the lecture, I recommended a book, and it was by what? Dale Carnegie. Is he Muslim? No. Did he die upon Islam? No. Does that mean we can't benefit from what he said on this topic? It doesn't mean that. Why? Because this is something which is universal. It's something which is based upon tajriba, experience, and it's universal. It's not something which is, we're not speaking about an issue which is purely based upon Iman, salat, for example, right? What can a non-Muslim teach us about salat, about dua, about dhikr? He can't teach us anything about these things. But about things that you do in your daily life that can lead to misery or can bring about happiness, then it's a shared experience, it's universal. Right? So amongst the causes of happiness, those that have been weighed wisely and well trodden, i.e. it's universal. Amongst the causes of misery are those that have been notable and recognized. And then there are those practices mixed with both, causes of happiness and misery, as per whatever Allah has accorded. And indeed, Allah is the one who grants opportunities and means assists with goodness and prevents from evil. On a side note, as I was preparing for this lecture yesterday and today, apart from what I've just asked you to do, which is to paraphrase the points, right? Just briefly, I was looking at one explanation. And before I looked at the explanation, I'd already looked into the books that I'm telling you to read, right? Basically, because it's something that I'm into self-help and all that stuff as well, development, personal development, right? And the funny thing is, as I'm reading this explanation in Arabic, what does the guy start quoting? I see in Arabic writing, transliteration in Arabic, of English into Arabic, Dale Carnegie in his book, La Qalqa, or Do Not Worry, basically, right? So he's already referencing the same book, right, and explaining this book. And what's he done? He's lined up the means that Shaykh Abdul-Rahman Al-Sa'di mentions in his book with the work of, and that's not surprising because scholars, they take the knowledge which is sound, doesn't contradict the Quran, doesn't contradict the Sunnah, from wherever it may be, if the person is knowledgeable in that thing. It's not a case of, okay, because they're non-Muslim means that that's it, they don't have any benefit. In any case, I found it quite funny that I see his name being popping up all throughout this not throughout the explanation. Now, step number 1, what does he say? He says, true belief and performing good deeds, right? Iman and actions. He goes, the primary and greatest means for happiness and achieving a good life is having certainty in belief and good deeds, right? How do we know that? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا مِنْ ذَكْرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَلَنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. Whoever does good deeds, whether he's a believer, male, or believer, female, verily we will give him a life that is good and pure. Right? وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. And we will give him the reward of the best of what he used to do. So if you look at this ayah, Allah informs and promises a good life in this world and a good life in the afterlife for whoever joins between true belief and righteous deeds. And then he goes on to say the reason is clear, it's obvious. For whoever believes in Allah sincerely, such true belief, i.e. they have Iman as-Sahih, will lead to righteous deeds. And such belief will also mend and rectify the heart, i.e. it will develop the person and make the person a better person. That's what it's saying basically, right? The person has true Iman, his Iman will lead to righteous deeds, i.e. obedience. And that obedience will lead to a better life for him because Allah created him and Allah knows what's best for him. It will correct one's behavior. It makes good both this world and the hereafter. And such people have the basic elements that guide them in dealing with situations of happiness and joy and situations of anxiety, sorrow and grief. In other words, they've got the blueprint to how to behave in all types of circumstances and situations. Okay, so they begin to perceive bliss and joy coupled with contentment and thankfulness, utilizing it towards things which are positive. Reacting in this way brings about delight, recognition of blessings and hope of reward. This simultaneously increases their accumulation of greater goodness and blessings beyond what they have gained. Right? I.e., once you see a blessing, you're thankful for the blessing, what happens? You're increasing the blessing. So it becomes something that, like the Hadith mentions, a person speaks the truth and that continues to speak the truth until it's recorded as that person as being truthful. And the opposite, they lie and continue to lie until it's recorded as that person as being a kadhib, a liar. A good deed brings about another good deed, which brings about another good deed. Until the person ends up in a state where they find contentment and happiness, basically, right? So on the other hand, i.e. the liar, in harmful and unpleasant situations of grief and sorrow, they deal with them by resisting what can be resisted and lighten what can be lightened. Now this is the case of the believer still. And they persevere and show contentment over what they have no power over. This first chapter is a summary of what he mentions in the rest of the book. Right? He goes, thus they achieve the benefits of earnestly striving and gathering experience and inner strength. They earn the reward of patience, the greatness of which diminishes in comparison the distaste for things that befall them. As a result, they end up having in place of the unpleasantness, joy and good hope and a sincere desire for the favors of Allah and His reward. The Prophet ﷺ beautifully expressed this situation in an authentic hadith where he said, the affair of the believer is really wonderful. This is a hadith where it says, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إن أمره كله خير إن أصابته سراء شكر فكان خير له وإن أصابته ضراء صبر فكان خيرا له وليس ذلك لأحد إلا للمؤمن رواه مسلم. This hadith, it speaks about the affair of the believer. It says that the affair of the believer really is wonderful. All his affairs are good. When he is touched by ease and affluence, he's thankful and that's good for him. But when he's touched by suffering and hardship, he's patient and that's good for him. And this is only for the believer. He combines between what? Shukr and sabr, basically. A believer's reward is multiplied in every situation. Is such that when encountering any kind of favor, blessing or calamity, we usually see two types of people respond according to the level of their Iman and the level of the conviction they hold, which is also reflected in the goodness of deeds each one conducts. You have two types of people when it comes to good and bad, basically. The first type is a person who has both belief and righteous deeds. This person faces the ups and downs of life with thankfulness, patience and acceptance. This will lead him to a more wholesome life in this world. He recognizes such attitude alleviates misery and counters episodes of sadness, anxieties and grief in life. The second type is a person who's haughty, disbelieves and transgresses beyond limit when endowed with favor and grace. This in turn impacts his manners and etiquette as he adopts those favors with greed and miserliness, almost animal-like. Despite this, his heart remains anxious and worried about everything. He becomes afraid of losing what he loves and anguished over suffering harm. His soul is insatiable or insatiable, always seeking more of the things he sometimes manages to get and sometimes doesn't. Even when acquiring it, remains uneasy. When faced with trials, this person responds with anxiety that constricts the chest, with fear and resentment. Do not ask about the misery their life goes through. The ailment of the mind and body bring out the worst in them. This whole outlook is a result of a deep void and emptiness, because such people do not expect to be rewarded by their Creator, do not have reasons to assume patience that would lighten their burden. What this is saying is that believers and disbelievers, when it comes to trials and tribulations, you have two types of people: believers and disbelievers. As for believers, he understands how to respond to bring about the best outcome for him. As for disbelievers, he doesn't know how to respond to bring out the best outcome, so he responds according to his own whims and desires, right? Which means when he goes through hardship, he's complaining and worrying and grieving. When he goes through ease, he thinks it's all because of him, so he becomes proud, haughty and arrogant, basically, right? So there's two types of person, a believer and a disbeliever. A person who's a believer seeks contentment with the decree of Allah and knowing the various levels and blessings, right? Then he gives examples as well. As for this, then this is apparent for the one who's able to see. An example of a virtue that is brought about through patience is the encouragement to be content with the sustenance Allah gives a person with. If you observe this characteristic amidst humanity, you will see a striking difference between believers who practice their faith and those who struggle to reconcile faith. The believer, for example, if tested with sickness and poverty or other than that, will remain even-tempered, and his heart does not demand that his condition be made known. He will look to disadvantaged persons beneath him and not those above him so as to appreciate his blessings. It may be that his happiness exceeds the happiness of those who have obtained all the pleasures of the world. This is due to faith, acceptance and satisfaction and the delights they contain for its beholder to reflect upon. On the contrary, the person who does not exercise the consequence of his faith, i.e. it could be a believer but he has weak Iman, right? I.e. the person does not exercise what Iman dictates in those situations. I.e. he has weak Iman, he has lack of knowledge of how to behave and how to respond to these situations. Then his faith will epitomize sadness whenever tested, even with a few shortcomings or loss in his worldly ambitions. But one whose faith is firmly rooted and has a heart that is strong, a soul that is tranquil and nurtured and primarily in control, his mindset, words and deeds are attuned to face life's ups and downs. These are the things that calm a person. Weak faith makes it susceptible for feelings to be jolted and nerves to be tensed and for the mind to dissipate, resulting with a heart filled with shock and awe from outside and from within, the condition of which cannot be expressed in words. Such a person, not accustomed to naturally adapted attitudes or controlled emotions, which usually take a lot of practice, will have his energy drained and his spirit stressed. There's a point here which is important, i.e. dealing with tribulations, it comes with patience and it comes with practice as well. Okay, i.e. you've heard this statement that the more falls a person has, the stronger he becomes. Alright? I.e. you fall over, you get up. You fall over, you get up again, then you become resilient to falling over. I.e. let's take a worldly example. Someone's coming to you and they want you to be a partner in a business. You want to see what they've done. They've set up 10, 15, 20 businesses. Someone comes to you, they haven't set up any businesses. Who are you going to go with? The experienced one. Why? Because he would have learnt from the first business, the second business, the third business, the fourth business, the fifth business, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 5th. He learns from that. So a person, when it comes to tribulations or dealing with things, it's not just having knowledge. Knowledge is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is practice. Right? You have to practice patience until you become patient. You have to practice tolerance so you can become tolerant, right? I.e., tolerance becomes by practicing tolerance. Patience comes through practicing patience. It's not something you're just gifted with, right? Some people say, oh, mashallah, he's patient, right? How did he get there? That's the question. Mashallah, he's tolerant. How did he get there? That's the question, right? It was through going through situations where patience was the only good outcome for that person. So he practiced patience, and he practiced patience until he became patient. So it's true whether righteous or disobedient. If a person's a person of birr or person of fisq, right, a believer or disbeliever, both share the common human quality of acquired courage, shuja'ah, as well as the innate ability to deal with dreadful situations and lessen their oppressive effects on the self. They both have it, i.e., inside the ability is there for both, believer and disbeliever. So what differs, what distinguishes one from the other, right? But the believer, because of his strong Iman, don't dismiss the importance of Iman in overcoming obstacles. It's only through Iman and belief in the afterlife where a person is able to overcome obstacles and be patient through trials and tribulations, right? But the believer, because of his strong Iman, his patience and reliance and trust in Allah, and his desire to be rewarded by Allah, excels in having qualities that make him more courageous and soothe more effectively the pangs of terror and the pains of calamity on him. And then in this regard, then the author quotes an ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you in terms of a quality which is shared between both, right? Allah says, in this ayah, He mentions, وَإِن تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ فَإِنَّهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ كَمَا تَعْلَمُونَ وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ. i.e., if you are suffering hardships, i.e., it talks about what we're speaking about here, in jihad or in losses of losing loved ones and stuff like that. i.e., if you're suffering hardships, then they're suffering hardships as well, like the hardships you're suffering. But the difference between you and them is that you have hope in Allah for reward and they don't have any hope. In other words, you have Iman, they don't have Iman. So you have the uppermost strength because of your Iman, right? It goes, in addition to that, the believers receive from Allah His special help, His assistance that He will drive away the dread and terror that befall them, right? وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. And be patient, surely Allah is with those who are patient. So he goes, amongst the means of eliminating worry, grief and anxiety is being gracious towards creation. This is the second point. This is the second point now. So the first point, if we were to summarize the first point, we're saying that number one, a person has to realize that true happiness lies in recognizing and acknowledging that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only source of your happiness, right? That the only source of your happiness ultimately is going to be Allah. So turn to Him in sincere worship. Alright, so turn to Him in sincere worship. That's the summary of the first point. The second point that he mentions, although it's not considered a second point in the book, pertains to maintaining good character and relationships with others, i.e., having good dealings with people. That's the second point. In other words, treat others with kindness and integrity so you can attain a greater sense of happiness in your life. He says, this is a second point, even though it's not considered a second point, on page number 23. He says, among the means of eliminating worry, grief and anxiety is being gracious towards the creation by words and all types of good acts, i.e., giving sadaqah, saying something which is motivational, being positive in your speech, basically. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was known to have tafa'ul. What's tafa'ul? Tafa'ul is what? Is optimism, right? You know that statement, is the glass half empty or half full, right? i.e., how do you perceive things, right? It's known scientifically it's known. Matter of fact, it's ajib, it's so ajib. When you delve into it more and you read into it more, you're going to see how ajib it is, how your mind and the power of positive thinking and good thoughts and stuff like that has an impact on your health and your body. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to have tafa'ul. Tafa'ul is, you can visit an ill person, right? A person in hospital, they're ill, they've just had an operation. What do you say to them? You look terrible. You know, you look like you're on death's door. Or do you say to them, you're looking strong. You're looking better today. Inshallah, you'll be home next week. What are you going to say? The first one or the second one? Second one. The first one, you're going to kill him. He's going to start worrying. He's going to start thinking more about him. Do you understand? And that's going to have a negative impact on his health, 100%. The opposite's also true. It's going to have a positive impact on his health. A person, in terms of how they deal with others, it has an impact on also he himself as well. It has an impact on him, right, as well. So in any ways, it speaks about maintaining good conduct with the creation, treating others with kindness, integrity, and that's going to lead to a person's greater happiness, right? In other words, you're going to build positive relationships. You know, you always hear about the person, you know, he always burns bridges, right? When you hear about that type of character, what does that make you feel like? How does it, repelled. Do you want to meet that person, chill with that person, sit down with that person, or it's like, I'm going to avoid that person. He's just known for burning bridges. You're going to avoid that person, right, because of their impact. The opposite is true. The opposite is true. Somebody that brings about benefit, right, you're going to want to be around them, not because of the benefit, just because of the fact that you want to be motivated, you want to be encouraged, right? And that's why Islam enjoins good speech and good actions. All of these are good and excellent in the sight of Allah, and by them Allah removes worries and anxieties from both the good and the evil, each in accordance with his level of being good to the creation, right? We have the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ لَا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. Here this ayah, it says, and remember when we took the covenant from the Bani Israel. What was the covenant? This ahad, this covenant, it is universal. It's universal for all people. It doesn't change, right? It's not from the ahkam that change. What was the covenant? Only worship Allah. Number one, the first thing, the rights of the creation. Straight after that comes your relationships with other people. What does Allah mention? وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Your parents, do good to them. Ihsan, good. Then he mentions, and not just to your parents, but also to relatives, and also to orphans, and also to the masakeen, and also speak good to people, and speak good to people, right? And then he says, and perform the salah. Look at that. The salah and the actions which are the pillars of Islam are mentioned after the things that relate to the rights of the creation, in terms of being good to your parents, these obligations which are universal. Anyway, he goes on to say that all of these, a person is according to the level of the good they do to creation, right? Except that the portion of the believer is more complete and perfect, as he also excels by the fact that his goodness is out of sincerity to Allah and seeking his reward. Meaning that everyone shares in this. This is where we have this example where you hear people saying, I went in a non-Muslim country and I found Islam. When they say that, what do they mean? Do they mean these people are Muslims? Have they entered them all into Islam? They don't mean that. What they mean is that they found that people were acting according in the terms of their dealings with each other, they were honest. They fulfilled their contracts. If they said they're going to be somewhere, they were there on time, they weren't late. Right? That's what they mean by that only. In their dealings with one another, they were acting according to but remember, they lose out on the most important thing, which is what? They're doing it because it's professionalism. Because it's part of their career. They're not doing it because of Allah or because of seeking reward in the afterlife. Right? Which is why, as a principle, even in fiqh, for example, we have this mas'ala which is, when you're going to get a diagnosis, for example, the scholars say you should go to who? A doctor who is Muslim. If you want to bring to a court someone that's going to bear testimony for you, for example, that he's got a medical condition or whatever it is, that he was sick or that, it has to be a doctor who's Muslim, because the testimony of a non-Muslim would not be accepted in principle, right? That's the principle. Unless there's a qarina which is external to the fact that makes what he's saying be the truth. What is that qarina? That qarina that they say, for example, i.e. a professional duty. He's part of a professional body. He's not allowed to lie because what's at stake? His entire career is at stake, basically. So because of that, so these things are considered external factors. It's not because of Iman, but it's because of an external factor which is there, right? Which is the professionalism part of it, right? But again, they're not doing it because of Iman. This is a distinction between a believer and a disbeliever in these matters. He goes, as a result, Allah makes the act of doing good and granting it easy for him because of his hope in the goodness with Allah, and he removes from him pleasant things because of his sincerity to Allah and seeking the reward with him alone. And then here he mentions a verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, لا خير في كثير من نجواهم إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس ومن يفعل ذلك ابتغاء مرضات الله فسوف نؤتيه أجرا عظيما. There's no good in most of their secret conversations except for the following: a person who is encouraging a person to do a deed of charity or goodness or conciliation between people. Whoever does that seeking the pleasure of Allah, we should bestow upon him an immense reward. And then he explains the verse. He says, in this verse, Allah the Most High informs us that these are all acts of goodness for whoever does them, and acts of goodness brings them benefit and removes evil. Meaning, this act of giving charity and this act of goodness, or this act of making conciliation between two people that are arguing, right? You have two people that are in a debate, in a dispute, in an argument. You bring them together in conciliation. This act itself brings about goodness to the person that's doing it. Not just to the people, but to the person themselves that's doing it. It brings about goodness and it removes evil. Therefore, for the true believer seeking reward and pleasure of Allah, for him, Allah gives an immense reward. Part of that immense reward, pay attention, part of that immense reward is removal of grief, sorrow, and anguish. Right? Which means what? If a person is actively seeking to remove concerns from them, i.e. grief, or for example, worry, or anxiety. Today we speak a lot about anxiety, right? And we speak about mindfulness. And we speak about removing stress, right? Because stress affects you negatively. It makes you worried. We speak about all these things and ways in which a person can deal with these negative emotions and negative feelings, okay? And there's loads of self-help books. People go to counseling, people go to psychologists, psychiatrists, and all that other stuff. It's a huge business, massive, because of the pressures of modern day society. But as a believer, the answer's there. In the Quran, in the text of the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, in the way in which the scholars have explained it as well. Right? i.e., it's not necessarily about finding out how to remove the grief, it's about being active in doing good in other areas, and your grief will be removed for you. Your anxiety will be removed for you. That's what the author is saying here. In other words, تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. Right? Cooperate upon birr and taqwa. ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. And don't cooperate upon sin and transgression. In other words, a person builds positive relationships with others. Right? Instead of destroying a building, instead of destroying a community, you build the community and you build the building. By being a part of the development of a community, your hardships are going to be removed. That's how it works, basically. Right? The Messenger of Allah said in the Hadith, they described the believer towards another believer like what? Like one body, right? If one part of it is suffering, the rest of it feels the symptoms, basically, right? And as well, a believer is like a building. Each brick builds. Do you understand? So as a community, if a person is seeking to remove anxiety and seeking to find contentment and happiness in life, then he should look towards what he's developing in his community or amongst other people, i.e. his relationship with other people. And fix that. Your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your siblings, your relationship with your neighbors, your relationship with your teachers, your brothers in Islam, your relationship with your spouses, your kids. Fix your relationships. Do you speak good or are you always critical? Are you positive or are you negative in your community? Do people gravitate towards you or do they gravitate as far away as possible from you because of you're always having a harsh tongue, always being critical, always being... Pay attention. If you look at all of the hadith of the Messenger of Allah and his seerah and his biography, what are you going to find? You're going to find gentleness, you're going to find rifq, you're going to find lean, you're going to find smiling, you're going to find compassion, you're going to find mercy, you're going to find helping others, kindness, you're going to find all of these. You're not going to find rude speech, you're not going to find being mean, you're going to find being critical, you're not going to find apportioning blame, it's your fault, criticizing. You're not going to find any of those things, even in the worst moments, let alone in the best moments, right? So a person has to reflect on their relationship with other people if they want to remove grief from themselves and happiness. The second one, it says, step 2, right, in the book, although this is step 3 for us. It says, occupying oneself with activity and useful knowledge. i.e. being busy, all right? i.e. engaging in activities, right? Activities which are beneficial, either seeking knowledge, and let's say here we're not just speaking about knowledge of Islam, not the term that we're speaking about Islam, ilm is qala Allah wa qala Rasul, not seeking knowledge, education, or working. One of the two. You're either seeking knowledge or you're working, but you're not in a state of stagnation, okay? You're either seeking knowledge or you're working. You're either working for money or you're working for free, but you're working. When I say working for free, I don't mean as in it's completely free, because work is never completely free. When you're working for someone, you're getting training, right? You're doing voluntary work, you're getting training. You're also learning different things as well. And you're being tested where if there is a job that comes up, you're going to be the one that's going to be first in line because they can see that you can do the job. And if they don't give it to you, go volunteer somewhere else. It means that they don't have confidence that you're the best person for this job anyway. So just go somewhere else anyway. But generally speaking, you have to occupy yourself. If you want to seek happiness, you shouldn't be a person that's stagnant, that's not moving, that's not making steps in a direction. Education or, that's what he's saying here. i.e. amongst the means of warding off anxieties and the preoccupation of the heart with sorrow, i.e. depression and being sad, is to occupy oneself with one activity or another, or with some useful knowledge. Right? This is because doing that will distract the heart away from being immersed in its anxieties. Everyone knows. For example, when a person's sad, what do? You want them to forget their sadness or distract them and occupy them with something else. Like regards to kids. Some people think, okay, kids are misbehaving at school, at home, whatever. You're a teacher, you teach at school, small kids. You're at home, you've got kids. Kids are misbehaving. You've got two options. You can punish them and discipline them, and maybe they're going to misbehave more, but just not in front of you, because they'll be scared. Or you can distract them, right, and give them something else to do apart from the thing that they're doing, which is being naughty at that moment. If you distract them and give them something else to do, it's better than obviously punish them and discipline them, especially when they're at a very young age. It says this is because doing that will distract the heart away from being immersed in its anxieties. It will help him to forget the things that caused him grief and sadness, and he may even experience some happiness and become cheerful. This is also something that is common between both the believer and the non-believer. i.e. what he's saying here, this is a tried and tested method, right? You know, you can take this knowledge of how to, for example, remove these things, griefs and worries, from non-Muslims to an extent. Parenting, from non-Muslims to an extent, right? As long as it doesn't conflict and go against your Quran, because it's something which is universal. But the believer is different. Why? Because when he occupies himself with the knowledge that he is seeking or giving, or with the good action he is doing, whether it be an act of worship or worldly act where his intention is to seek strength in worship in Allah, when he does that out of the belief in Allah, sincerity, and seeking the pleasure of Allah. This in itself has the additional effect of warding off grief, sadness, and anxieties. By what? By divine intervention. Meaning what? What does it mean? i.e., al-jaza' min jins al-amal. Okay, there's a principle which is well known, that your recompense comes from the action that you yourself do. So when you're a person, for example, that is removing a difficulty from somebody else, what happens to you? Allah removes the difficulty from you. When you're removing the sadness from somebody else, what happens? Allah removes the sadness from you. Right? This is from divine intervention, meaning is al-jaza' min jins al-amal. So if a person is in the khidmah of other people, i.e. other Muslims, right, then he's going to have his distresses and his anxieties removed, right? Because Allah is the one that controls the hearts. Allah is the one that controls the hearts. Allah is the one that's going to relieve you of your hardship. So this is why a person in doing a good deed with the intention of pleasing Allah, he's going to get back more than he is doing. So he goes on to say, we have seen many people afflicted with sorrows and permanent anxieties to the extent of making them very ill. The only cure was to make them forget the cause of their sorrow and misery and be preoccupied with their normal activities. SubhanAllah, look at this. What's he saying? He's saying to you that when you come across a person that seemingly has a mental, it's considered mental health in our time, isn't it? Anxiety, it's a mental health condition, depending on the severity of it, or it's in a spectrum and stuff like that. What's he saying? He's saying when you find a person that has anxiety, right? He says the best thing you can do for them is to distract them so they forget about the thing that's causing them anxiety at that time. Give them something else to think about. Give them a purpose. Right? Give them a hobby. I make them significant so they can forget about the thing that's making them feel anxious or feel sad and depressed and down, basically. It's not about medication. This is important to understand. It's not about just, here's a happy pill, pop it. Right? Here's antidepressants, take it. Right? That's not the cure. That's not the cure. Right? All that does is mask something for a period of time, if it even does that. There was a study speaking about depression, and before they used to say depression is a neurological thing. It's a neurological thing, which means that if you can change the balance of the mind through medication, you can remove depression. The latest science, this is why I never trust science. Always, never, ever trust science. As good as it looks, someone else is going to come later and disprove it and say something opposite. Caffeine's bad for you, no, it's good for you. Right? They said that there's no evidence whatsoever which is strong enough to stand on its own, that depression is neurological. That's an imbalance in the mind, basically, right? So antidepressants do not cure or resolve the problem of depression or sadness, right? It doesn't do it, because it's not a neurological thing, and all that does is it shuts down some emotions and opens up others, or whatever it does. I'm not a doctor, but the point is that's the latest study on that. So here he's saying that you find many people, their only cure, i.e. pills didn't work, was to make them forget the cause of their sorrow and misery and be preoccupied with their normal activities. Now, for example, if you go to a doctor, although doctors like to prescribe, I'm not saying don't take any medication at all. I'm not of that camp either, right? Don't take any medication. But if you go to a doctor and he's going to give you a holistic cure for anxieties, or he won't tell you to take medication, he'll tell you to become occupied. Be busy, go out, do exercise, right? Because of it releases certain hormones or whatever, right? He's not going to tell you just take antidepressants and everything's going to be okay. He's going to give you a holistic thing. How's your sleep pattern, right? Are you exercising? Do you go out? Do you have? He's going to say change your environment, basically. That's what he's going to tell you to do, because your environment has an impact on you, and by changing your environment, you're going to change the way you're feeling. Right, and it's almost common sense, except for the person that's living it, obviously. All right, except for the person that's living it, it's not that easy to see at the time. In any case, it says activity to be preoccupied with should be something pleasing to the self and one that it yearns for. This makes it more effective in achieving the desired goal, and Allah knows best. In other words, do something that makes you happy. Right? Do an activity that brings around joy, whether it's a hobby, right? for example, I don't know, some people, they enjoy traveling. Go and travel then. Go and travel. Some people enjoy, for example, playing football. Go and play football. Some people enjoy, for example, certain things. I.e., as long as the thing that they're doing brings about their happiness, and that's something which is going to, and it's not impermissible, then do that. Don't say, okay, well, I can't do this because, no, go and do the thing that brings about happiness, because that's what's important at that time. Then he goes, occupying yourself with the present, i.e., another name for this is work on what you can do today, right? I don't think about what you're going to do tomorrow. What am I going to do next week? How am I going to find a wife in next year? How am I going to find a job? How am I going to get a house? Forget all of that. Work on what you can do now, right? I.e., there's a book called Getting Things Done. It's about task management, right? It's an okay book. It's got some benefit in it, right? One of the tips he says when you do your to-do list, there's things on that to-do list that you can do in 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Just do them now. Just get it done. The reason why, 2 reasons, because there's another camp when it comes to to-do list and management, right? I'm going to tell you in a minute. This one says, when you make your to-do list, there's going to be about 5 things that only take 2 or 3 minutes to do. Don't put those things off, because you can do it in 2 minutes, you finish it in 10 minutes. And what you'll get is that kick of, I've done 10 things, which is going to push you to do 5 more things which are harder, right? And also as well, it stops you from procrastinating on that one hard thing. Where do I begin? Do I start here? Do I start there? Do you know what I mean? So just get things done that you can do now, right? Don't put it off because you think, oh, it's too big. Many times people put off something thinking, oh, that's going to take long. And when they actually do it and finish it, it's like, hold on a minute, that was a lot easier than I thought it would, and a lot quicker than I thought it would take. Why? Because you've overthought it. You've worried about it, you've anxiety about it. Just do the action and done. So he says, occupying oneself with the present, i.e. being present, working on today's task, what you can do now. He says, among the things that ward off worry and anxiety is to concern oneself with the affairs of the present and not to be anxious about the future nor grieve over the past. Right? Get out of your head, basically. Right? Get out of your thoughts, thinking of the past, okay, regret, remorse, how am I going to overcome? Or worrying about the future. Right? Work on what you can do now. This is why the Messenger of Allah sallallahu sought refuge in Allah from anxiety and grief. Right? Anxiety is about the future, grief is about the past. Right? Grief is about the past, anxiety is about the future. So grief, he says, is usually over past events that you can neither bring back nor rectify. What benefit is there letting it have space in your head, basically, when you can't do anything about it, literally? As long as we can't do anything. Anxiety is usually fear and concern over what will come in the future. Therefore, a person should concentrate his energy and attention to the betterment of his existing events and his present moments. Focusing on the affairs of the moment is a necessary cause of them being accomplished, and it is what gets rid of grief and anxiety from the heart. And it's true. The other camp I was going to mention in terms of task management is you list tasks and you pick the 3 biggest ones, right? And you do the biggest one first, the biggest task. Because usually the biggest task is the one that is more connected to your advancement in something, right? Either your advancement in worldly affairs, your advancement in religious affairs, whatever it is, it's usually the biggest task. The other way as well is when you're doing your task list or you're doing your things that you need to do, for example, for the day, is to do it, and this might sound like a contradiction, but it's not, is what you're going to do tomorrow, you're going to plan or think about today, right? I.e., what am I going to do tomorrow? Okay, then you're going to prioritize. Number 1, this is the one that's going to have the most advancement. And number 2, this is going to have the second most improvement in terms of my self-development in worldly and afterly affairs. Focusing on the affairs of the moment is the necessary cause of them being accomplished, finishing, and it is what rids of grief and anxiety from the heart. When the Prophet ﷺ asks something from Allah or guides his community to ask specific from Allah, he exhorting them with seeking help from Allah and having hope in his favor. At the same time, they have to work hard and earnestly for the accomplishment of what they ask to be removed from them. Therefore, making dua should go side by side with action. So the slave strives for what will benefit him in his religion, his worldly life, and he asks his Lord to make him accomplish his need, and he seeks his help in that. And this is based upon a hadith which is well known with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ihras ala ma yanfa'uka wasta'in billahi wa la ta'jaz. He says, strive for what benefits you, seek the help of Allah, and do not be incapacitated. Right? This word, la ta'jaz, okay, ajaz has two types of meaning. Inability to do something, right, despondency, or laziness. Right? i.e. just being, let's say, procrastinating, putting it off. You got the ability to do it, but you're going to be lazy at this moment. You're going to keep putting it off. Here, what does the hadith say? Do not be what? Do not be lazy. Don't put things off, right? I.e., ihras ala ma yanfa'uk. First of all, you have to do that. Seek that which is going to benefit you in your worldly life or your afterlife. Seek the help of Allah and do not be lazy. Don't procrastinate. Do it. Take action. When a person prays Salat al-Istikhara, right? What do? Do you pray Istikhara and wait? Sit down. You take the means. You take the means. The purpose of Salat al-Istikhara is not to pray and wait for something to happen. You pray Istikhara and you take the means, right? Whatever it is. There's a job I've applied for. I want to go. I'm going to go to pray Istikhara and go to the interview. I don't pray Istikhara and wait for the phone and say you've got the job. You didn't attend the interview. You didn't send your... No. Same thing with marriage. Pray istikhara for marriage. Okay, I'm inclined towards this. I'll pray istikhara and then take the means. Take the step forward. If it works out, alhamdulillah, barakah. If it doesn't work out, alhamdulillah, barakah. You don't lose out. Why? Because you prayed istikhara. Because you prayed istikhara, what happens? You're not going to have any grief, sadness. You shouldn't have. If you do, it's a weakness in your iman. Right? At the same time, because you prayed istikhara, what you're not going to do is keep knocking that door and pushing it until you break it down, regardless of the istikhara that you prayed. Right? I've become obsessed. I'm not listening to I haven't read the sign, right? And stuff like that. In any case, the hadith mentions strive for what will benefit you. That's the first thing. And seek the help of Allah and do not be incapacitated. And if something afflicts you, do not say, if I had done such and such would have happened. But say, this is the decree of Allah. He does what He wills. This is because if opens up the door to shaitan. Right? I.e., if in a situation that you can no longer go back to and control, only opens up the door to what? Grief. Right? And sadness. But if when you're using it in something which is a possibility, then it's permissible. Right? Something which is possible for you to attain. If I'm going to work hard, I know then that's okay. It's only if when it comes to the past event that it can no longer change. In this hadith, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam exhorts us to join between two things. The first is to strive for useful things in all situations and seek the help of Allah and not surrender ourselves to powerlessness, because that is from negligence and harms. The second is to surrender events of the past to Allah and witness in them the decree of Allah and His predestination, i.e. the qada of Allah and His qadar. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam defined two matters. The first category are affairs the servant has the ability to accomplish, and the second are those which he doesn't, basically, right? Or those that he can avoid completely. Okay, you have two affairs, basically. Those that you can do because it's inside of your control and ability, and those that you can avoid because it's inside of your control and ability. And the second are those that you have no control over, right? Okay, for the first one, the second category is the affairs over which the servant has no power. For the first category, you have to exert effort. You have to work hard. Literally, you have to work hard. You have to exert effort, put time, right? Spend money, right? Do what you need to do that's permissible to attain that goal, basically, while making dua to Allah. For the second, there's nothing you can do except calm yourself and accept what Allah has decreed and surrender to it, because it's outside of your control. So there's no doubt that complying with this principle is a definite means of achieving happiness and keeping worry and grief away from oneself. How can we summarize this? This point that he said, we want to summarize it in a short passage or a short paragraph. Number one, keep busy with purposeful activities. Number two, accept the inevitable, the decree of Allah. Accept it. You can't change it, and it's got hikmah for you anyway. So accept the inevitable. This is what Allah is. This is outside of your control. Right? There are circumstances that are beyond your control, i.e. other people's actions. You control your actions, not their actions. Okay? If something has happened that was not something that you did, it was outside of control, you have to accept it and submit to it and comply with it. Understand that this is a decree of Allah. There's no point worrying about these things. There's no point spending too much time thinking about it and living in the past. It's better to focus on adopting a positive attitude and a solution. That's it. Going forward, right? With regards to the first, which is keeping busy with purposeful activities, i.e. a person has to align his actions with his values and his goals. What's my goal? My goal is that I want to please Allah, I want to go to paradise. Align my actions with it. What's my values? Integrity, honesty, since I've aligned my actions with my values and my goals. By doing that, you're going to find contentment, basically. That's what he's saying here. Naam. Also as well, the hadith before is mentioned, which is the affair of the believer is always good. Something good happens, he thanks Allah. Something bad happens, he's patient. As a result of that, it's always going to be good. The other thing which you can add here is to having strong Iman. The Messenger of Allah said, the strong al-mu'min al-qawi khayr wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min dhif wa fi kulli khayr. The strong believer is better than the weak believer, and all of them have good. Right? That's the beginning of this hadith, the same hadith. So it connected to that is having strong Iman and being strong physically. Right? Because if you're going to be working hard, you're not going to do it on what? Without having strength. I.e., you're going to be working hard, you're going to be putting in effort. Right? You're not going to be doing it by being a couch potato. You know, you get out of breath, right? When you're walking, oh, I need a cart everywhere. No, walk. Get exercise. Include physical activity in your life because, as we mentioned before, if you want to have a healthy outlook in terms of a mind, you need to have a healthy body. It just goes hand in hand, literally. It goes hand in hand. You need to be physically active, right? You can't be a person that's not physically active. You know, men and women as well. It's not just the case where it only applies to men. It applies to women as well. They should be physically active because it's going to help them in their mental well-being, right? And there's so many, couples, married couples that you find they exercise together, and it's a good thing, right? When they go to the park, they'll go walk together instead of taking a car, for example. You know, instead of him going to the gym, and she's like, "Why are you always going to the gym? What about me?" No, we've got an app. We don't have to go to the gym. We'll download the exercise app. We'll do the workout together. So then they're participating. That also builds bonds of love as well between the couple. The next step, he says, is remembrance and thankfulness. Remembrance being one, thankfulness being the second, i.e., one of the biggest impacts on you being happy is you constantly remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we know that? Allah says, Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Is not in the remembrance of Allah do the hearts find tranquility. Right? So amongst the greatest means to achieve the expansion of the heart and its tranquility is abundant remembrance of Allah. Remembrance of Allah has a profound effect of bringing relief and tranquility to the heart while removing worry and grief from it. Allah the Most High said, Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Without doubt, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find satisfaction. Because this is because of the great effect that the remembrance of Allah has over the hearts and the fact that the servant, when remembering Allah, has hope of receiving a good reward and recompense from Him. Alhamdulillah, a Muslim, he's almost constant in his remembrance of Allah. There's a hadith which is in the Arba'in al-Nawawi where the companion came to the Messenger of Allah and said, Allah wa inna shara'i Allah qad thaqulat alayya, or kama qala. He said that the sharia, basically all the rules have become heavy upon me, right? Give me something that I can always do. Something that I can be constant in. That I want not, that we're talking about ability, right? Okay, Hajj, it requires money, it requires strength, right? Which is why if you don't have the physical ability or the financial ability, it's not an obligation, right? It's not easy to perform Hajj. Also, zakat requires money, right? Certain other acts of ibadah, they require you to do something physical. It's either physical or financial, bodily or, right? A person can't fast because of old age, because of illness. He has to give expiation for each day. But he can't fast because of his body, right? It's physical or it's financial. This companion came up to the Messenger of Allah, he says that the shara'i of Allah have become heavy, right? Give me an action that I can always do, remain constant. He said what? La yazal lisanaka ruthbun bi dhikrillah. Don't let your tongue always be constant in the remembrance of Allah, right? Meaning that it's not something that requires muscle power, right? Or requires money. Doesn't require muscle, doesn't require money for you to make dhikr of Allah. And the impact of it is profound, right? I.e. a person finds themselves in a situation of grief, then say, La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. Make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're going to calm your mind, you're going to be remembering Allah, and Allah is going to remove your grief for you. Right? That's why you find, for example, after every salah, what's prescribed? Astaghfirullah, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. Right? You find the dhikr of Allah is prescribed in so many different places. So you find that that's one of the ways, that's why he says the great effect that the remembrance of Allah has over the hearts, right? Allah's commanded it on us because of the impact it has on the heart. The impact it has on the heart. It's not something which you see, for example, a physical impact externally, but its impact is on the heart. And it doesn't mean you're making dhikr in your heart. Dhikr is of the tongue. You have to make dhikr of the tongue. Now, you can't go on and say, okay, his heart's constantly in the state of dhikr. Oh, what do you mean? Explain it. Because that's a statement which is mujmal, it's general, it's explanation. The other thing it says is thankfulness, i.e. practicing gratitude, right? I.e. expressing gratitude to Allah for His blessings leads to increased happiness. Thankfulness, amongst the things is to mention the favors and blessings of Allah on oneself, both the outwardly manifest and hidden favors of Allah. There is no doubt that recognition of Allah's favors and blessings and speaking about them is a means by which Allah removes grief and worry from the heart. And this noble act encourages the servant to be ever thankful, and such thankfulness reaches the highest level. Even though the servant may be in a state of poverty, sickness, or other forms of tribulation that engulf him, when he compares the countless and endless favors of Allah upon him with the trials that befall him, he sees how extremely small they are in comparison with the blessings of Allah granted with him. I.e., when a person goes through a tribulation, I've lost my job, right? I've been kicked off of my course at university. Or, for example, I've got an illness, right? I've got this illness or this sickness that has happened, right? Or I've lost, how do you make that tribulation lighter, right? How do you make that difficulty and that hardship easier? Start thinking about your countless blessings. I've lost the job, but I've still got the ability to work, right? I've still got it hasn't worked out in my marriage. Okay, I can get married again, right? I'm not being funny or nothing, but there's plenty more fish in the sea, as they say. Vice versa as well, right? If it didn't work out for her, she's the one that's feeling sad about the whole situation because she wanted him and she was really happy with him, but he's not happy with her. Don't worry about it. You'll get married again afterwards. Don't think about what you've lost, but think about what you can get and what you have. It will lessen the sadness and the grief of the loss. Count the numerous blessings you have, as opposed to the one or two or three things that you're going through. Usually it's only one thing at that time: losing a loved one, losing a job, losing your money, getting scammed. If you're into crypto, that might have happened to you a lot. Getting scammed for crypto or something, right? Okay, you got scammed, but you got the ability to work and get more money, right? You've still got clothes, you've still got a roof, you've still got food. Those are the only things money's going to buy you, right? You're not without those main fundamentals. Look at all the blessings. Still got eyes you can see. I can go, check the charts again later and resume. You've still got all the blessings that gave you that thing in the first place. Allah hasn't removed them from you. So a way in which a person increases their blessings and diminishes hardships when they face him is by counting the blessings, not the one hardship that you're going through or two hardships. There's only one or two at the time. So he mentions here as well, in fact, he goes, trials and tribulations are such that when the servant is afflicted with them and he observes patience, contentment and submission in the face of the affliction and harm he's been tested with, their burden becomes lightened and their pain becomes mild. Notice he doesn't say their pain completely disappears. He doesn't say the burden is completely, he says the burden becomes lightened and their pain becomes mild. Don't think that you're going to have a life without tribulations, without tests. It's part of the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's through tests that the believer is distinguished from the disbeliever. Alright? So tests in and of themselves isn't the bad thing. Right? It's a response to it. In addition to that, the servant hopes for the reward that these afflictions will bring if he worships Allah while he embodies patience and contentment. Thus, turning the bitterness of observing patience into sweetness. Right? I.e., that bitterness, again, it becomes practice. Practice until you're going to reach that state. And there's no doubt that you'll reach that state. Right? That the bitterness of observing patience, you're being patient with a difficult situation, a difficult person, especially if they're close to you. Right? If they're close to you, they have more right to your patience than someone that's further away from you. But for some reason, the science of it, or the tabi'ah of us, is that we have less patience with those that are closer to us than we have with those that are further away from us. Meaning, in the workplace, we wouldn't be patient because it's money. But with our family, we lose all patience at the drop of a... Why? Because of the familiarity. Right? We see each other every single day. Okay, so we lose patience. But you have to practice it. In addition to that, the servant hopes for the reward that these afflictions will bring if he worships Allah while he embodies patience and contentment, thus turning the bitterness of observing patience into sweetness. So the sweetness of reward causes him to forget the bitterness of the patience. Right? I.e., it becomes switched, basically. Number 2, he says, implementing the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how to summarize the last point? Basically is to take time to, when you go through a hardship, to reflect upon all the blessings that you have in light of that one hardship. It reduces it, basically. You have to reflect. Right? Also as well, you can that list is endless. If you was to count the blessings of Allah, it's endless. You speak about health, right? Keep going. You speak about, for example, relationships of people that you have. Keep going. You speak about, for example, your meaningful achievements. Someone might think I've done nothing, right? They start to feel sad. This person's done that person's done that person's done that. Number one, they've lost one mistake because they're looking at the wrong people, right? But the second, they may diminish what they've done. And they start to have low self-esteem, for example. They don't value themselves. Okay, look at what you have done. Start counting your achievements, because there's many things that a person's achieved. If you start to count achievements, right, you'll see that. And don't think, okay, well, this is small. لا تحقرن من المعروف شيء. Don't dismiss any achievement that you've got, even if it's small. If it's an achievement, it's ma'ruf, count it. Why? Because the impact on you and your mental health and your value and your self-esteem is going to be good. Rather than looking at what I haven't done and starting to have low self-esteem and low value, do the opposite. Because believe me, everyone that's lived a period of time, they've got a stack of achievements they might not be achievements in societal standards, but that's not our measure. Our measure is Quran and Sunnah. It's not what society considers an achievement. Because if that's the case, as you can see, society is busted at the moment. Right? Completely. It's gone, I don't know where it's going, but it's not looking very good at the moment in terms of everything that's happening. It never was great anyway, but it's just getting a lot worse. So it says, implementing the teachings of the Messenger of Allah. I.e., what did I say about this point here at the beginning? Who remembers? What teaching is he specifically speaking about? Optimism, how? Positive thinking, how? What's the teaching? If he says implement the teachings of the Prophet, so he's speaking about a hadith. What hadith is he speaking about? Look at those that are below you, not those that are above you. That's better for you, that you don't become ungrateful from the favors of Allah upon you. That's the teaching. That principle specifically looking at those that are more unfortunate and lesser in every aspect, right? In possessions, worldly aspects, lesser in job status, lesser in income, lesser in everything worldly, right? The problem we have today, though, is through marketing, social media, and advertising, we're fed the opposite of that, which is a life which is very materialistic and everything should be better, right? We know every man that's married knows your neighborhood has an impact on your wife, right? If you move to a neighborhood where they're all driving, I don't know what cars, 7-seater Mercedes and BMW, and your wife is driving a Vauxhall Corsa, she's gonna be like, why haven't I got one of those? But if you're in a neighborhood where she's driving a Vauxhall Corsa and everyone else is driving, what's less than a Corsa? Is there anything less than a Vauxhall Corsa? Have I gone to a Nissan Micra? A Vauxhall Corsa might have been too low. Maybe we should have went in the middle, BMW or something. Everyone else is driving a Nissan Micra. She's going to feel what? Champion. She's happy. She's content. Right? So where you live has an impact, i.e. keeping up with the Joneses. What does that mean? It's known. It's not just amongst Muslims, it's known. What does keep up the Joneses mean? Always look at what your neighbour has and say, well, the Joneses have this, I want that. They've got this car, why don't we have that car? Their kids go to that school, why can't our kids go to this private school? Their kids wear, I don't know, Adidas and Nike, why are our kids wearing Puma and High-Tech or something? Right? Whatever. But that's the whole point, that's what happens. Meaning that mentality has a negative impact. Materialism is the disease that can be transmitted from person to person. Love of dunya is a disease that can be transmitted from person to person. When you're looking at people, don't think the only disease is a disease which is, what's it called, like the flu or, for example, viruses or bacteria. Those are diseases which they affect the body, fair enough, but they don't have the impact of love of the dunya is worse than those, right? Because that's a disease of the body. Your body can cure itself, but an impact of a love of the dunya, then it's harder to remove, and it transmits. I.e., love of the dunya at the cost of the akhirah. Let's add that caveat, so people don't think, okay, it means that you have to seek poverty. No one says seek poverty. You're not supposed to seek poverty. You're supposed to seek riches so that you can be comfortable and not leave your kids without anything, right? But we're talking about when you're comparing. And what's that statement? Comparison is the thief of joy. Right? Comparison is comparing with who? Those that are higher than you, right, is a thief of joy. Comparing with those that are lesser than you brings gratitude, instills gratitude, right? And among the most useful methods of acquiring happiness is earned by implementing the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ in confirmed narration where he ﷺ said, انظروا إلى من هو أسفل منكم ولا تنظروا إلى من هو فوقكم فإنه أجدر ألا تزدروا نعمة الله عليكم. He said, look at those that are below you with regard to worldly possessions, materialism. Do not look at those who are above you. That is more befitting for you not to hold the favors and blessings of Allah on you with contempt. Right? With contempt. I.e., Kufran and ni'mah is a sin. Understand that as a principle as well. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, and it's not connected to this specifically, but it's speaking generally of kufran and ni'mah, of not acknowledging the blessings of Allah upon you. The Messenger of Allah said, I saw hellfire and most of its inhabitants were women. Right? Women are going to have an issue with this, right? To some degree. They said, why? This is the important part. The important part is they asked why, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What was one of the reasons? Ingratitude to their husbands, kufran and ni'mah, i.e. the husband that works hard, strives, not the husband that's lazy sitting at home anyway and taking her income. Forget that, he's not included here. The husband that works hard, strives, sweats, right? Gets stressed out, gets pressured, deals with rubbish from people outdoors, comes home and she says, what's that? Is that all you've done? I haven't got this, I haven't got that. Kufran and ni'mah, right? It's a sin. It's a sin. Why? Because the ni'mah is it's what? Qadr Allah. Right? This is what Allah has decreed. He's striving, he's working, he's providing. And you say, is that it? Is that all you've done? So kufran and ni'mah is from the sins. You understand from that the opposite is what? Is ibadah. is worship, drawing close to Allah, being patient with that situation and showing submission and pleasure and happiness is from the best acts of ibadah that a woman can do. Right? Not just that, it also makes the relationship what? Happy. Right? I.e. the impact comes back to her and to him as well, because the relationship becomes happy. So not just is she pleasing her Lord, but she's also going to be living a better life. Right? Why? Because it's all about it's about a mental, part of it's a mental state. In any case, the author he mentions, if a servant were to put this noble teaching in front of his eyes, he would realize how far he has been exalted and favored over many people in well-being and having been exempted from tribulations, in richness, and what comes with it. So this is true no matter what his situation. If the servant does this, his anxiety will vanish as well as his grief and worry, and his delight and joy with the favours and blessings of Allah, by which he is being placed above many who are lower than him, will increase. The deeper the servant reflects on the manifest and hidden favours and blessings of Allah to worldly and religious affairs, the more he sees that his Lord has granted him so much goodness and has distanced him from countless worries and sadness. There is no doubt that all this removes sadness and sorrow and replaces them with delight and happiness. Step 4. Removing whatever produces sadness and seeking a means to happiness. There's 2 points that he mentions. Number 1, not living in the past. Right? Not living in the past. A way to bring about happiness, to remove sorrow and anxiety, is attempting to eliminate the things that bring about misery and seek after the things that bring about happiness. Okay, the number 1, how can you do that? Number 1, this can be achieved by forgetting and discarding any misfortunes that happened in the past. Number 1, forgetting about, i.e., this is where sometimes counselling is bad for you, right? Go counselling, bring up all the past issues. No, turn a new page and forget them. Because why relive them, right? And live in the past and stay in the past, right? Counselling isn't always good. It has its benefit sometimes, it has its harm other times. In any case, he goes, this is to, number 1, forget and discard any misfortunes that happened in the past. Why? It gives a reason. The obvious one, you have no power to return to them. All right? You can't change it. You can't go back and, we don't have time machines, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change the future. It doesn't happen. Also, he recognizes that occupying the mind in these matters is in vain. In fact, it is stupidity bordering on lunacy. He goes, it's ahmaq junoon, basically. It's stupidity bordering. Why? Because you can't, i.e., for example, let me give you an example why it's stupidity and lunacy. If someone said to you, right now, right, imagine there's a massive rock, right, or this building, come, let's push this wall over. Go over there, push the wall over, and push the wall over, right? You're going to look at me like you're looking at me now. So what are you talking about? Are you stupid? No, you can't be stupid. He has to be crazy because the wall's firm, it's fixed, and I'm human. It's not in my ability to do that thing. Likewise as well, regards to something that's misfortune that happened in the past, you can't change it. You can't go back in the past and fix it, right? So to give it a place in your head constantly is stupid. It's not going to benefit you, basically. That's what he's saying, right? This means he has to detach his heart away from thinking about the past and keep striving to preserve his heart, not fearing things he imagines for the future. That's the second aspect. He must accept the realization that everything taking place in the future, whether good or evil, ideal or flawed, are from the unknown matters that alone rest in the hands of Allah, the Almighty, the Wise. Right? A person should only be concerned with cultivating goodness and refusing to adopt pathways leading to harm in the future. I.e., he's not living in the future worrying about it, but he's cultivating, sowing seeds for a future benefit in the present. He's still living in the present, right? So when you think about a farmer, he sows seeds expecting what? Expecting a crop, right? But the point is he's doing the action. The action's in the present. It's not in the future. He's not worrying about and thinking about the future. In this regard, there's another issue that people do, or that's common, and I think it's blameworthy, and the person needs to avoid it. When I get paid, I'm going to buy a car. When I buy a car, I'm going to become get an Uber license. When I get an Uber license, I'm going to save up money. When I save up money, I'm going to get married. When I get married, I'm going to. He hasn't done the first step, but he's already gone how many steps ahead? 20 steps ahead. That's not planning. That's not planning constructively. That's at the least wasting time. At the worst, a person letting himself down to be disappointed, basically, because you don't have that much control of the future beyond the first step or the second at the most, right? So, for example, I'm going to apply for the Jamia, so I'm going to not get a job until I get accepted. I'm not going to study anything else until I get accepted. I'm not going to do this because I'm going to get accepted. When I get accepted, I'm going to do that. When I do that, no. Apply, because it's a future thing that has a present impact, and then carry on doing what you're doing until you get accepted, because you may never get accepted. So why stop everything else? In that case, it says not living in the past. This means he has to detach his heart away from thinking about the past and keep striving to preserve his heart, not fearing things he imagines for the future. He must accept the realization that everything taking place in the future, whether good or evil, ideal or flawed, are from the unknown matters that only rest in the hands of Allah, the Almighty, the Wise. A person should only be concerned with cultivating goodness and refusing to adopt pathways leading to harm in the future. He must know that turning his mind away from negative thoughts and surrendering to Allah's all-encompassing knowledge and wisdom, his heart will find serenity and temperate his condition that in turn will improve his mental well-being too. How do we summarize this aspect? I'm going to give you a phrase that came from that book, right? How Not to Worry. It's called day-tight compartments. Day, D-A-Y, dash, tight, day-tight compartments. I.e., concern yourself with today, right? Instead of worrying about mistakes in the past, instead of worrying about uncertainties in the future, right? For example, I'm graduating now. What job am I going to get? I'm going to be graduating in 3 months from university, right? What job am I going to get? How am I going to get a living? How am I going to get a house? How am I going to get married? You're worrying about the future. Instead of thinking about the uncertainties of the future, focus on making the most of the present time that you have now. The futures is what? What's that statement? Yesterday was something, today and tomorrow is there. What's that statement? Yesterday's history. Tomorrow's a mystery. Today's the present, right? It's a similar. These phrases, they don't come from nowhere. They come because they're tried and tested, right? Yesterday's history, that's it, it's done. Forget it, right? Don't live in the past. Tomorrow is a mystery, meaning what? Uncertainty. You don't know what it holds. As for today, then today's the present. This is what you have. These are the tools you have, this time's have. So live in today, basically, right? Day-type compartments. We have this, there's a hadith of the Messenger of Allah which is well known as well. Take benefit of 5 before 5. Take benefit of 5 before 5. Your youth before your old age, your health before your sickness, your wealth before your poverty, your free time before you become busy, your life before your death. What does that tell you? Use now, live in the now, right? At the moment you have health, use it. At the moment you have wealth, use it. At the moment the future, you don't know what you're going to be able to, if you're going to still maintain it. It's uncertain. But what you have now is what you act upon now, basically. After that, he goes on to another section, which is using prophetic supplications, ad-du'a, right? Making du'a to remove worries and difficulties. He says that amongst the most beneficial acts in addressing hope of one's future is using supplications taught by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's many. He mentions 2 supplications. The first one he mentions is dua, "Oh Allah, make me adhere properly to my religion, on which all my affairs depend. Make this world good for me, which is my livelihood. Make my hereafter good for me, which is my ultimate destiny. Make my life increase in every good thing and make my death a respite from every evil." That's a dua, right? It mentions another dua where he taught us a following supplication: "Oh Allah, for your mercy I hope, so do not leave me in charge of my affairs, even for the blink of an eye. Rectify all my affairs, there's no good except for you." So he says, if the servant says this dua, which entails seeking betterment in his future, in terms of his religion and his worldly affairs both, right? It doesn't just say better my religion and my worldly affairs, which is my ma'isha. If it says that with a mindful heart, and a true and sincere intention coupled with an earnest struggle to achieve it, then Allah will grant him what he asks for, hopes in and endeavors to accomplish. Thus his worry will change to happiness and delight. Pay attention. Here he mentions not just the dua, but he mentions the key to getting your dua answered. Right? Number one, he says, you make it that dua, first of all, attentively. So it's not just, for example, your word for the day that you're just reading. Don't get me wrong, it has a benefit by itself. But he's saying you're now contemplating every word that you think about, that you're making dua, you're attentive to what you're saying. Right? It's not just lip service. Second, he says, with a sincere and true intention. Right? That's the second thing he says. Third thing he says, and this is important, coupled with an earnest struggle, right, to achieve it. Right? You have to actually try to make that thing happen. You don't just make dua and leave it and not do anything, basically. That's what he's saying. You make dua and you do the thing that you're asking for. Right? I want wealth. All right? Okay, I'll make dua for wealth. But what else do I do? I get educated, I get qualified, I get a skill. I take that education, that qualification, and skill, and I apply it to a job. Or I start a business with it. Right? I work not just 9 to 4, because I want to be rich. I want to be wealthy. I don't just want to be on a average income. So I'm going to work 9 to 9 for 5 years, for example, whatever. For 3 years, for 4 years. Why? Because I've got an objective, so I'm going to work hard. I'm going to make dua, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to make dua, I'm going to work hard. Okay, why do you doubt that you're going to be wealthy? If that's and if your intention is sincere, you know what you're asking for. You're working towards what you're asking for. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. Actions are by intentions. Everyone will get what you intended. Right? I.e., you make an intention and you do the action, you will get what you are seeking. Right? Basically. So a person shouldn't have doubt in that. But the issue is what? The issue is always a deficiency in one of these two. Deficiency in my tawakkul and my i'timad ala Allah, or a deficiency in my working hard to attain what it is I'm asking for. Right? I want to play along the way. I want to also do this. I want to also enjoy this. I want to enjoy that. So I don't put in the effort that's required to attain that thing that I'm asking for. So I get half of what I want. Right? But if a person follows it properly, then he shouldn't have any doubt that he's going to get what he wants. The next thing he says is to imagine worse situations. He goes, amongst the most beneficial means that eliminate anxiety and sorrow of a person overcome by trials and calamities is for him to struggle to lighten its difficulties by imagining the worst possible thing that could happen. Right? This means, okay, what is it? This is like a coping skill. You develop a coping skill whenever you come across calamities or difficulties. How am I going to deal with this difficulty? What coping skill am I going to apply to deal with this difficulty? And by doing so, you cultivate resilience to calamities and tribulations, right? Because you're going to have tribulations and calamities. It's just what's your coping mechanism? And by applying that over and over again, you're going to build resilience. That's the basic formula. Amongst it goes, this means he's able to weigh and predict the worst possible scenarios and outcomes and then being prepared to face them. Anticipate, right? Like I said to you before, a person's, they have a car accident, right? So their car's damaged. Okay, it's a musibah, right? I need my car for work, means I might lose income for a couple of days. Okay, it could have been worse. You could have lost your life. Your wife could be burying you next week. They could be grieving, right? Your kids could now be orphaned, right? Alhamdulillah, it's not that bad. It changes. It's no longer as bad. It's just money. It's just a car. It can be fixed, right? I could have been seriously injured. I can't work forever. Forget 5 days while my car's being fixed because I'm an Uber driver or whatever. No. I could have been injured properly, I lost my sight, lost my hand, lost my ability to drive a car. My whole income's gone. I imagine in worst scenarios that you can have to lighten the burden. That's a coping mechanism. Right? So this means he's able to weigh and predict worst possible scenarios and outcomes and then be prepared to face them. He builds strategies able to better position himself to minimize risks as much as possible. Anticipating the possible harm before it happens so you minimize the risk. With preparedness and stratagem, he will unlock the mental block and deal with sadness and loss by the very attempt to reach out for goodness and reject pathways of harm. Right? He says, when one is stricken with fear or illness or poverty or deprivation or what he likes and covets, let him receive these afflictions with tranquility and dedication in resisting the worst that these afflictions could bring. I don't make the situation worse than it already is. It's a bad situation. How you respond can only either worsen it or better it. Choose the path that betters the situation, doesn't worsen it, basically. Thus, one combines the qualities of determination and tireless efforts that keep him engaged rather than feeling anxiety on account of the affliction that struck him. Even if the challenges are great, his strong determination will ease the burden of his mind and ease his pain, preoccupied with navigating outcomes according to his ability. Within him merges an impressive etiquette and a steady soul, diverting attention away from negativity, seeking also to renew strength to face challenges while relying on Allah, convinced of his assistance and hoping for reward. There's no doubt that these approaches have a huge role in achieving happiness and peace of mind. It can be witnessed and tested, and many people have experienced it, and whoever tastes it knows it. It's tried and tested, basically. How do we summarize this? Basically, it's about developing coping skills and cultivating resilience before the thing happens, right? So you're resilient to it doesn't break you, basically, right? It doesn't negatively affect you, right? You can overcome obstacles because you've cultivated a resilience and you've anticipated them. From them is maintaining a positive mindset, obviously, as he mentions here, right? From them is also seeking support. All right, don't be a person that thinks you have to overcome all obstacles by yourself. A lot of people, they don't like asking for help, right? Because they see it as weakness or whatever it is. They don't like asking for help. However, when it comes to difficulties, seeking support is a coping strategy that helps, basically. Then he mentions reliance on Allah. He says firmness of the heart and reliance on Allah. Amongst the greatest cures, i.e. to nervous and mental disorders and even other illnesses of the body, is related to the firmness of the heart and its strength. They are not drowned or affected by illusions and imaginations that come from negative, evil thoughts, i.e. they don't have negative thoughts, basically. But when man gets caught lusting over desires and fantasies, he will become a target of affliction. That includes anxiety, depression, physical pain and stress. His heart will be affected by disorders like anger, panic, disturbance and prejudice upon the appearance of bad things and the loss of good things. Reliance upon Allah, right? This is basically saying trust in Allah's decree, right? Have patience and trust in Allah's plan during hardships, because the happiness is going to be the end result. Al-Aqibatu lil-Muttaqeen. The end result is always for the people of taqwa, right? When the heart relies and depends on Allah and isn't surrendered to illusions and does not let evil imaginations get the better of him, and puts his trust in Allah and remains convinced of Allah's grace and good expectation, sorrows and anxieties and various illnesses disappear, with the heart gaining strength, relief and happiness that are beyond expression. How many hospitals are filled with sick people suffering from mental illusions and evil imaginations? How many strong people have these things shatter their hearts, let alone of weaker ones? The only one exempted is the one whom Allah has given more being and guided him to struggle with himself in acquiring useful and beneficial means of strengthening the heart and warding off worries from it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever puts his trust in Allah, then Allah is sufficient for him. Meaning that Allah is sufficient for him in all that worries him concerning his religious and worldly necessities. A person who's mutawakkil, who puts his trust in Allah, is strong-hearted and unfazed by prejudice, nor disturbed by fluidity of developing events, because he understands it stems from weakness of the soul and unnatural fear. He also knows that Allah has guaranteed the one who puts his trust in him to suffice him completely, so he's confident in Allah, and he feels assured of the promise of Allah as a result of having his losses reversed, sorrow and restlessness removed, and his difficulties replaced by ease, and his sadness by happiness, and his fear by peace and security. We ask Allah to give us all well-being and exemption from adversities, and to grant us strength of heart and its firmness in having true confidence in Allah, by which He guarantees those who have His provision of all good and removal of all evil and harm. This point is speaking about tawakkul. What is tawakkul? It's i'timad ala Allah. It's depending upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything. If a person is fully dependent upon Allah, then he's not going to be fazed. Basically, that's the kind of khulasa of it. He's not going to be fazed by what changes, right? Prejudices, disappointments from people. It doesn't matter because he wasn't dependent or trusted in the person. His trust was on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not putting my trust in you. My trust is in Allah. You're just a means. Right? If Allah doesn't bring it through you, He's going to bring it through you. If He doesn't bring it through you, He's going to bring it through you. I have my trust in Allah. I depend upon Him. My heart's strong. Right? I'm not worried whether it comes through you or comes through you because I trust in Allah that it's going to come. Like that. So that's what it means. You don't depend upon people. You depend upon them from one aspect, but your heart isn't attached to them. Right? You depend on them, for example, let's take a worldly example just quickly, right? Because it's something that everyone sees and witnesses. A football player who's exceptional carries the team, right? Okay, when they sell him, what happens to the team? They go down a little bit sometimes, right? But is the team still continue or not? Does the team just all of a sudden they've gone? They're no longer existing. They still play football. They still continue. Right? It doesn't matter how good and how important the player is. There's a statement that the manager always says, which is, the team is bigger than every and any player. Doesn't matter who the player is. The team is always bigger. Okay. Meaning that they might depend on him to score 50 goals in a season, 60 goals in a season, but they'll still sell him when the money's right, when the offer is big enough. Why? Because the player doesn't make the team. Generally speaking, the team is always bigger than the player. What I'm getting at is that a person is never dependent on the person. Right? It's not the person that you're dependent upon. It's through you, but I'm dependent upon Allah. So it doesn't matter, my heart's not shaken if you don't do it. Or if you don't do it, or even if you don't do it. Why? Because I'm not dependent upon the person. And that way a person's content. He's not disappointed. He's not let down by people. Sometimes people feel upset, you've let me down. Yeah, you've been a letdown, you're not reliable anymore. I'm not going to call you up, but I'm not fazed by it. Right? You've just proven that you're not the person that I can ask to do something. That's all that's happened. Right? I.e., instead of letting me down, who have you let down? Yourself, as is well known, right? As is well known. A person that doesn't show up, he's let himself down, he hasn't let down the team or whatever else. The second one is repelling evil with good. There are two important lessons to learn from the words of the Messenger of Allah. Step number 7 in the book, which is, let not a believing man hate a believing woman, i.e. let not a husband hate his wife. If he dislikes one of her characteristics, he will be pleased with a لا يفرق مؤمن مؤمنة إن كره منها خلقا رضي منها خلقا آخر. In a hadith which is in Sahih Muslim. This has two big benefits. Benefit number 1, how to deal with people that you have a close relationship with. And benefit number 2, it removes worries and stress. These are two benefits of the hadith. Benefit number 1, how do you deal with those that you ever close? The closest two people come is marriage. Okay, how do you deal with someone that you're married to that has characteristics that you dislike? Because it's impossible, I'm telling you now for free, if you're single, don't think you're going to marry a woman that you like everything about her. Not possible, it doesn't exist. And she will not like everything about you. Right? The secret is what? Is not to tell her what you dislike, of her not to tell you what she dislikes, in terms of, in a mean way, in things which are not able to change, right? Because they are generally fixed. You marry someone, how old? Generally speaking, let's say 20, right? Or 21 after uni. Some people get married at 18, but most people 21, around that age, isn't it? 21 years before she knew you, before he knew her. Do you think that she doesn't have her own eating habits, sleeping habits, waking habits, whatever habits they are, right? And likewise you as well. So if you see a habit, something that you dislike, then what should you do? The hadith is clear. Look to that which you like and ignore that which you dislike. It's not look to what you like and also criticize that which... No, ignore it completely. Ignore it completely. That's what it says. Let not a believing man dislike. He shouldn't hate a woman. A husband shouldn't hate his wife. A wife shouldn't hate her husband. If he dislikes one of her characteristics, he will be pleased with another. It provides guidance in dealing with one's wife, close relatives, friends, colleagues, and anyone who's connected or had something to do with you. In work. In work, we can be more tolerant because, we're going to act professional. So we dislike someone, we might not show it. At home with our wives, we're going to show it. It's the opposite. She has more right to you not showing it than he does, generally speaking. At work, I mean. You should realize that everyone has a disagreeable trait, a disadvantage, or something that you do not like. In this case, compare the individual shortcoming with your duty of care in maintaining relationships and showing affection. This can be done by remembering all of their goodness and well intentions and by overlooking their faults and recalling happiness. Friendships and relationships will last the test of time and manifest comfort. You want a happy relationship with people, apply this principle, basically. Apply this principle to be able to it's called, everyone knows, turn a blind eye. I.e., turn a blind eye to a person's flaws. Turn a blind eye. Or bite your tongue. Same thing. Pretend you can't see it, or bite your tongue and hold yourself from speaking about it, basically. Right? That's one aspect. That's the benefit. How to deal with others you have a close relationship with, like wife. Second one, continued sincerity in being ever ready to fulfill this obligatory rights and voluntary rights as shown by the Prophet's guidance in this hadith in creating harmony between two disputing parties. This can only result in doing away with any grief and sadness. Whoever does not understand and put into practice what the Prophet taught and acts contrary by focusing on the negative side of people and forgetting the good will inevitably be panic-stricken. This will in turn lead to relationships becoming sour and murky, making dormant the obligations to keep each other connected. Marriage is, I keep saying, and I say this from the aspect of a literary point of view, is a comedy, not a tragedy. Right? If any time you're reading literature or you're watching, marriage is funny, right? People don't die. If they die, then it's a tragedy. If people are miserable, then it's a tragedy. A marriage is supposed to be what? If complete sentence, I get married to B. Is it miserable or happy? Happy. Marriage is a celebration. Marriage should be happy. Which means if you're going to come into a relationship, whether it's marriage or other relationship, i.e. partnership, business, right, work relationship, a team effort, football, whatever, you're going to be negative, criticizing. The happiness is going to disappear. Why? Because people can only take so much, right? What is there nothing good? Is there nothing good you can find that you can only say some things which are bad? That you can't see anything positive. If you can't say positive, the question will be, why were we married? Why were we in business? Why are we playing on the same team? Right? If I'm that rubbish, then replace me. If I'm that bad, then why? Do you understand? And that's always the thought process. So the issue of relationships here, if you want contentment for yourself, learn to overlook flaws and to turn and to bite your tongue in many of these situations. Otherwise, the relationship becomes a relationship of misery rather than a relationship of pleasure. And marriage should be a relationship of pleasure, it goes without saying. The second one, it says, life is short. Life is short. Section 1, high aspirations and inner energy. Many people with high aspirations and inner energy are able to prepare themselves to deal with heavy calamities and adversities with patience and tranquility. But when they are faced with small and trivial issues, they become worried and anxious and their hearts lose clarity of thought and become clouded. Bear in mind, the word for hearts, when we speak about heart, we're speaking about your soul, we're speaking about your nafs, right? When we speak about your heart, it's not the organ that's just beating. We're speaking about your mind, right? So when we say their hearts lose, their soul loses clarity of thought and becomes clouded. The reason for this is their ability to control themselves in major events and unable to do so in minor things because they are easily annoyed by finer details they observe and thus upset their balance of comfort. A person who's able to handle himself during both major and minor situations has a deeper connection with his Creator and seeks success in Him. He asks Allah not to forsake him or surrender his affairs to himself even for a moment. This is the key to him being at ease in both ends of a situation. He will become more calmer and his heart will be at peace. The enjoying moments of happiness is the last point that he mentions. Inshallah, we'll complete this. And I might just summarize it because how many pages have we got? It's a few sections. How many pages is it? 2? Bear with me for the next 10 minutes. We're going to go over time by 10-15 minutes. Is that okay? So we complete the book. That's the question. Who's got the Arabic open? Someone open the Arabic to see what he means by what's inner energy, huh? Who's got the Arabic open? Let me find it. How many pages left? No, it's not. That's from the same author. I'll have a look. I don't think it is. Are you sure? I think that what they've done, they've used two words to explain one in the Arabic. What we're speaking about is ulu al-himma, right? Ulu al-himma, which is having high aspirations, i.e. a person always aims for the highest and the best, right? Instead of saying, for example, okay, I want to be, I just want to be a hafiz of Quran, for example, not just. I want to be a hafiz of Quran that leads a Taraweeh prayer in the masjid. Right? That's ulul himma. Why? Because not to show off, because you want what? The reward and the ajr. Right? You're seeking the best. Instead of saying I want to be a student, not say I want to be an alim. Instead of saying, for example, I want to be a person that, for example, gives sadaqah. So I want to be the person that leaves behind waqf, that continues. Right? You have ulul himma. Right? I want to be wealthy. Why? Not for materialism, so I can do what? So I can leave behind sadaqah, waqf, that continues after I die. I have ulul himma. I want my life to continue when I die, so I can continue getting rewarded. How will it continue? With waqf, or knowledge that people benefit, or continued knowledge that people benefit with, or dua of the righteous son. So I'm seeking all of these. Ulul himma will be, okay, I just want one. Or himma will be, I want one. Ulul himma, I want all three. I'm greedy. Greedy for what? Rewards. That's ulul himma. I don't just want to be the one that leaves beneficial. I want to be the one that leaves beneficial, leaves money that people benefit from, and has a righteous son. I've got ulul himma. That's what it means. So that maybe this is what he means by inner energy. I.e., that's himma is not outward, it's internal, right? So perhaps that's what it means. Let's go back to the English and see how many pages we've actually got. 4 pages before the appendix. So we've got 4 pages, isn't it? Inshallah, we're going to get through what we can do, and when you're tired, just let me know. The last part that he's speaking about is, what did we get to? Enjoying moments of happiness. Let me give you a summary of these first, and then we'll start reading. So if we don't finish, you've got the summary. First thing he speaks about is life is short, right? Life is not long. So if life is short, what intelligent person spends that short life worrying about past events or being anxious about future events? You don't have much time to spend time in anxiety or in sadness or in worries. That's one thing. Second, when people try to harm you, realize they only harm themselves. Don't be affected by people speaking badly about you. Someone might backbite you. Okay, he's backbiting, he's sinning. That's my good deeds. Understand that he only harms himself. It's like the teacher that wants to punish the child and hits the child and he hurts his hand more than he hurts the child. He only hurt himself, basically. That's one. Not that teachers are allowed to hit children. The third, don't seek people's validation for your actions. Don't seek validation from people. Seek the pleasure of Allah. Right? This is the third from the summary. The fourth, think good thoughts. Have a positive mindset. I cultivate it. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Right? With hardship comes 2 eases. That's a positive mindset. If I've got a hardship, I know, alhamdulillah, it's no big deal because I know what's happening. I'm going to get 2 eases afterwards because Allah promises it in the Quran. Positive mindset. That's the fourth one. Also, prioritize your actions. Right? I have a choice between two things. weigh them up. Which one is more beneficial for me? I'll do that. Which one is least harmful? I'll do that one instead of the one. I prioritize your actions. You can't do everything. I.e., the life is short. I can't do all of my tasks. Which ones will I do? Right? Don't focus on the one that's going to give you. There's a book called, I think it's, what's it called, the 20-80 method or something like that. I forgot what it's called. Right? 80-20. I.e., for all of the tasks that you do, 20% of them are the ones that fall. Do the other 80% are the ones that don't have much impact. Focus on the 20% and give the 80%, the 80 to somebody else to do. Delegate, basically. You can't do it all, right? It's as much as you want to, you can't do it all. Why? Because time's limited. So these are the kind of the main things. To prioritize actions, you have to have clear goals. Right? You have to have a clear goal. You have to have a clear purpose. You have to know where you're going, basically. Right? You can't prioritize actions if you don't know what your goals are. You don't know where you're going. No. That's the summary of what he says in the next few chapters. Let's read through it and we get to where we get to. Inshallah, we'll stop in 10 minutes in that case. Enjoying moments of happiness, right? The intelligent person knows that his real life is a life he lives in happiness and tranquility, and that it is very short indeed. Therefore, it's not wise to shorten it further with sorrow and let it drift away with turmoil as this goes against a truly lived life. He will feel a massive loss when most of his life is lost in vain due to sadness and pessimism. In other words, be optimistic. Right? In this case, all types of people are similar, but the believer holds more value in applying the principle because of aforementioned reasons. When he is overridden of anguish or afraid of a looming disaster, he is prompt in comparing between the favours he has gained with whatever has befallen him. At that moment, he realizes the greater amount of favours he has and how often he is kept away from many other troubles and calamities. He likewise weighs between any fear of looming danger with much hope and possibilities to overcome and survive them. Inna ma'al usri yusra, inna ma'al usri yusra, twice, right? Thus, he does not allow smaller possibilities defeat stronger possibilities. He estimates the worst of risks and prepares himself for any eventuality, while at the same time trying to reduce or replace the risk altogether. Included among the helpful means is recognizing interference from other people against oneself, especially with bad speech, will not hurt you but hurt them. The example I just spoke about, right? You're going to face people that are going to speak about you, ignore them, right? If you listen to them, what's it going to do? What's the statement? Don't let them get in your head, right? If they get in your head, it's going to lead you to have worries, anxieties, anger, frustrations, right? You don't need that. Ignore them, it's going to be better. Turn away from people that are ignorant. Don't give them your time, don't give them space in your life, basically. Right? So when something included among the helpful means is recognizing interference from other people against oneself, especially with bad speech, will not hurt you but will hurt them. It can only hurt you if you become absorbed thinking about it and letting it control your feelings. If you're oblivious to it, you will not be harmed by it. There's that statement, isn't it? Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me, right? That type of thing. Right? Ignore it. It doesn't affect you unless you let it affect you. When something unpleasant happens to him or is afraid that it will happen to him, he should remember the other blessings of Allah on him in his religion and worldly life and compare them with the unpleasant thing. If he does that, he will realize how abundant are the blessings of Allah on him and how insignificant are the troubles that befall him, i.e., think good thoughts. Right? Expecting Allah's response. Among the most useful ways to drive away grief is to train yourself not to desire thanks and gratitude from anyone except Allah. So if you are gracious to someone who has a right over you or not, then know that this is by way of your dutiful interaction with Allah. Hence, do not care about any praise, reward, or thanks from people who receive your kindness, as Allah said about the attitude of the chosen people amongst His creation. إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. They say, we feed you only for the pleasure of Allah. We don't desire from you reward. We don't want recompense. And we don't want thanks. It's not scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? It's nothing to do with that. I don't care if you scratch my back or not, because I'm not doing it for anything in return at a later date, right? If you thank me for it, it's up to you. Even if you don't thank me, it doesn't bother me. Why? Because I'm not seeking your validation for my action. I'm doing it for Allah, right? This is important. Especially in our time as well, where a lot of people are dependent on other people's recognition of what they do to feel good about themselves. This is highly emphasized regarding family, children, people who have strong bonds of relationship with you. As you become mindful to distance away any harm from them, that's when you feel good about yourself and invite tranquility and joy. Taking lessons from calamities. Amongst the means leading to happiness is learning those things that are ennobling and then setting out to put them into motion, without needing to force oneself to do so in order to prevent the soul from distress. It's part of wisdom that you extract something good even from what is seemingly bad. This will inevitably bring pleasure and distance displeasure. Take all that is useful and try to utilize it for your benefit, and avoid useless things that may cause harm and anxiety. Stay composed and focus on tasks deemed more important. Right? I prioritize, think good thoughts, right? Create a positive mental attitude, develop a positive mindset, basically, right? Be optimistic. Last part, he says, prioritize important tasks. Amongst the things that will bring about satisfaction is executing the job well with immediacy and with perfection, and then following it up with the next task to be to similar high standard. This will naturally be gratifying, for if work is left incomplete, it not only piles up but also leads to discomfort and ache as you play catch up. Every student knows that. Every university student experiences this. The stress you get when you have to finish something last minute reading, last minute exam preparation, it's stressful. Everyone says, yeah, I work better under pressure. No, you don't. Believe me, you don't. If you're prepared from the beginning of the time for that test, you'll be in a much better position mentally and stress. I'm telling you for a fact, it's known. Yeah, you get it done because you've got no choice now, but don't get it twisted. That does not mean you're doing it happily, comfortably, without stress. Right? Anyway, it says, this will naturally be gratifying when you do your work, and if you leave work and play catch up later, you're going to end up with headache. If you complete every job in a timely manner, you are then relieved to face tomorrow's business with maximum effect and effort. I.e., tick off tasks. Something which is really important to do is to put down a task, finish it, get on to the next one, finish it, get on to the next one, finish it. Be focused, basically, right? And also always do the most important things first and prioritize what you're doing. It's crucial that you sort out and manage the most important tasks first while making the distinction between what you enjoy and what you prefer. Also, one of the ways in which you're going to complete tasks is doing the ones that you enjoy first. Right? I.e., do the things that you enjoy doing. Don't always just do things that you don't like doing, because you're not going to be happy either. It's prudent to vary between tasks to ensure they do not become tedious, chaotic, or bring boredom. Another tip. I.e., don't do the same thing. Once you've done something for an hour, 2 hours, switch, do something else and come back to it later. Right? There's no such thing, pay attention, as, when I say no such thing, I'm talking about in terms of the outward ibadah, of a person being constantly engaged in ibadah. And they're not constantly praying, they're not constantly doing tahajjud, and they're not constantly fasting. Doesn't exist. There's moments of energy, there's moments of rest. You want to make sure you are prepared for your moments of energy in your moments of rest by varying what you do, right? Sometimes do this, sometimes do that. Seek knowledge, read, pray. After pray, read something which is not connected to seeking knowledge, not connected to your own development, right? Whether it's coding, whether it's physics, whether it's football, whatever it is. And then go back to that again. I vary what you're doing, basically. Don't just do the same task all the time, because what's going to happen is you're going to tire yourself out. Saddidu wa qaribu. Make sure you're doing some of everything, right? He says it's crucial that you sort out and manage the most important tasks first while making a distinction between what you enjoy and what you prefer. It's prudent to vary between tasks and to ensure they do not become tedious, chaotic, or bring boredom. Consider options with a clear mind and consult people whom are worthy to be consulted. And another important, have a mentor. Have someone who's older, already done what you're trying to do and achieve, and take them as your consultant. Make sure you do that. That's going to give you success. Right? You don't have to make mistakes. They've already made them for you. So take their skill and experience and apply it in your life. People who are conscientious and deliberate will not regret their decisions. Learn what you need to perform in detail. If you are sure about the benefits and make a determined choice, then rely upon Allah, because Allah loves those who place their full confidence in Him. This concludes our short treatise, and we beseech Allah to rectify the affairs of those who are sincere in seeking His aid. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, and may peace and blessings be upon our Prophet Muhammad, his family and companions. Alhamdulillah, with that, we've read the whole book in English, which is good. The book is beneficial. It's not the same as your normal type of book in terms of he combines between giving advice which is religious and advice which is worldly in terms of management, right? And I think that's important because this highlights something about Shaykh Abdul-Rahman Al-Sa'di, is that he was mutafannin, and all the scholars are. Don't think the scholars, they're going to, because they only teach, for example, Aqeedah or fiqh or Hadith, they don't have knowledge of technology, they don't have knowledge of current affairs, they don't have knowledge of what's going on in different countries, they don't have knowledge of different things, time management, tight schedules. You'll find the scholars have the tightest schedules. They have the best time management, they have the best task management, they have the best prioritization and stuff like that, right? They're the earliest when it comes to implementing technology in many cases as well, right? So the point I'm getting at is that this highlights how you'll find, for example, especially with Shaykh Abdul-Rahman Al-Sa'di specifically, if you look at his works, you'll find there isn't a subject almost except that he wrote something in it, right? Whether it's worldly subjects like these or issues in Hadith or fiqh or usul al-fiqh or mustalah Hadith or tafsir of Quran or all the Islamic subjects as well, right? And why do I mention that? Because it's important as a student of knowledge to be rounded and to be balanced, right? They say that about Shaykh Al-Albani as well. He wouldn't discuss any topic except that it's as if he had the most knowledge in that topic than everyone sitting around. Medicine, he could talk about it. Economics, he could talk about it. Right? Any topic. Likewise as well, they say the same thing about Shaykh Abdul-Rahman in terms of if he spoke about logic, right, he'd refute Greek logicians. If he spoke about Christianity, he'd refute Christians and Jews. If he spoke about philosophy, he'd refute philosophers, i.e., he knew the subjects. So scholars of the past said, while they were scholars of Islam, they were also knowledgeable about other subjects. And that's why, because they were people of knowledge, education, reading, learning, and developing and improving as well. And obviously, you're living in this world. So you have to make sure your life in this world complements your objectives for the afterlife, right? And so that's why it's important to understand, for example, management, time management, task management. It's important to understand, for example, how to overcome anxieties, how to overcome sadness and depression and things like that as well. Because Islam addresses all of these things. And at the same time, there's no harm benefiting from what? Non-Muslims in these affairs. Why? Because it's something which is universal. It's something which affects humans. It's a human thing. Right? So in which case you take the knowledge from where it comes from, basically, right? As long as it doesn't contradict in conflict with the Quran or the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which case you know it's batil, so you throw it aside. Naam. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi